Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with YouTube's algorithm and will help promote the channel more. If you enjoy listening to the following story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. Camp Wanahee, Part 10, the finale. This fantastic story is written by Wanahee, a wonderful author over on Reddit's NoSleep subreddit. For previous parts, click the links. The day before we were to go on our suicide mission to stop Melixidrak, we found out that the weird cabin that disappears at Wanahee was actually Annie's doing. I had never noticed it before, but the cabin was more similar to a shantytown shack than a cabin. Sort of a hodgepodge of wood and other scraps. Annie had made it in a way to store things in this area that she stocked up with various implements and artifacts. However, due to her infection, she was never able to use it. We had her summon it so we could raid its goods. Coot, Marcus and I stood ready to go into the shack and take down the 3 child cult leaders as soon as Annie summoned it. There was a pop and a static field appeared again along with the cabin. It was jarring as there wasn't a flash or anything. One second it was there, the next it wasn't, like a bad cut in a cheap movie. The 3 of us burst in the door and found that the 3 of them sat huddled in a corner together, staring blankly ahead. They didn't move. "God damn it," Coop growled. Oh no," I said. "Oh shit, did it kill them? Did I kill them by putting them in here?" I began to panic. You might have," Marcus said. Annie stuck her head in. "What's wrong?" She looked over at the 3 in the corner and she laughed. The 3 of us turned to look at her, obviously shocked by the fact that she was laughing at 3 children who, while not being the greatest or the most likeable kids by any stretch of the imagination, were dead. "Why are you laughing?" I asked, wondering if she was some sort of sociopath. "Sorry," she said, wiping away a tear. "Don't worry, they're okay. They've just seen some crazy shit. When this structure isn't here, it exists between realities. There are some really weird things out there. See, they're even breathing and blinking, albeit slowly. Give them a few days and they'll be fine." As the 3 of us got closer, we could see that the 3 of them were indeed still alive. We carried them out and put them in a cabin we had made sure was locked from the outside and had all of the windows boarded up from outside. We were not going to be having another cult outbreak if it could be helped. Upon returning to the shack, we found Annie tearing at the floorboards in a panic. "Where is everything?" she asked, looking at us. "What? There isn't anything?" I asked, feeling my stomach drop. "Not unless it's all gone invisible, which I find very unlikely." She ripped out another board. She is frighteningly strong for her slender build. Sure enough, as we helped her to tear the rest of the shack apart, we found nothing that would be useful to help us. Annie walked out and sat on the step of the shack, looking utterly dejected. I walked out and stood next to her. "So how likely are we to succeed on this plan without that stuff?" I asked quietly. "How honest do you want me to be?" I sighed, looking around the camp. "That bad? Without those artifacts, we are pretty much up shit creek, Carl," Annie said. "Do we have any other options to fix all this?" "Not that I can think of." "Alright then, we'll keep this to ourselves. Tell anyone who asks that we found what we were looking for." I looked at her. I would rather them go into this believing that it isn't as suicidal as it will be. Yeah, that's a good idea, Annie replied, looking at the ground. What terrible luck to get my life back, only to have it end in such a useless way. Welcome back to the world, Annie. I walked away from the cabin, not really having a direction. This was likely the last day of my life. What do you do when you face that realization? I went back to my cabin and lay on my bed. I felt singularly overwhelmed by the fact that I was almost guaranteed to die tomorrow. I didn't want to do anything but get through the stages of grief before I had to face it. Felt like the best use of my time, I suppose. I thought I was going to get away with that too. However, a few hours after going into hiding, there was a knock on my door. I considered ignoring whoever was there, but decided against being a dick to someone else before I die, just in case there was an afterlife. I opened the door to find Marcus standing there. I invited him in and went back to sitting on my bed as he took the couch. It was faintly reminiscent of the night when he came to me and told me about his history at Camp Wanahee. Things were simpler back then, only slightly, but still simpler. How are the preparations going out there? I asked. As well as they can be, Marcus said. We've been keeping up the appearance that we aren't going to all be slaughtered tomorrow. Glad to hear it, I said. How are you doing with all of it? Marcus drew out a long sigh. Dunno. It's a pretty hopeless situation. However, there is a bright side. A bright side? I asked, scoffing. What's the bright side? We get to fight to stop the end of the world, he said, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Like a bunch of scrappy heroes. You've got to admit, that is kinda cool. And I get to be the rags to riches part of that, the guy who spent years in a mental hospital and comes back to stop a demon invasion. He shrugged with a chuckle. I'm going to get all the girls. I laughed at the inanity of his thinking. They won't know anything about it, Marcus. How are you going to get girls if they don't know? Man, you have no idea how girls work. They can sense greatness, and after saving the world, they will be unable to resist how great I am, even if they don't know why. If that's true, I really don't know how they all work at all, I agreed with a chuckle. I know, Marcus said. I saw it firsthand. You were pretty brutal with Maria. The bit of joy I had started to feel was instantly smothered by the memory of what had happened between Maria and I back in Annie's study. Jesus, you really know how to kill someone's mood, Marcus. I'm sorry, he said, and to his credit, he did appear to be genuinely sorry about it. I think you should talk to her, though. She'll probably shoot me, Marcus, I said. Regardless, we haven't had an opportunity to talk. Every time she sees me, she finds an excuse to be anywhere else. Besides, what's the point? There are only two outcomes I can see. We fail and all die tomorrow, or we survive and she leaves soon after, where she will quickly forget all of this. So it doesn't matter if I talk to her, it's all pointless in the end. Okay, that's a fair point, Marcus agreed. However, how about you go and do it, because you are actually a decent guy. I'm not, though, I said. A decent guy wouldn't have been such an ass to all of you. Decent guys can still be asses. You're too hard on yourself, he said. Besides, all you did was cuss me out when I was trying to be positive. I didn't take it personally. You were obviously going through some stuff at the moment, he shrugged. You're not a bad guy, Carl. You've been through a lot of shit, and you've still tried to do the right thing for the most part. Give yourself a little credit. It doesn't matter in the end, though, I reiterated. No one will remember. It does matter, Carl, Marcus said sternly. Acknowledging and trying to correct your mistakes always matters, regardless if anyone knows or will remember it. Kindness always matters. Fine, I sighed. I'll think about it. Marcus patted my leg and stood up. You'll do it because I know you're a good guy. I'll see you tomorrow. With that, Marcus left. What he said struck a chord with me that I wanted to ignore. The harder I tried, the more anxious I became. I knew it would be pointless, but after about an hour of trying to ignore the truth of what I needed to do, I got up and walked to Maria's cabin. I found her door open. Maria was inside, messing with the rifle she used on our expedition. I knocked on the frame. She stood up. When she saw it was me, she looked uncomfortable. "Hey, Carl. Hey, do you have a minute?" Maria turned her attention back to what she was doing. "Sure. What's up?" I walked in and sat in one of the chairs across from her. "We haven't really talked since everything that happened in the cave." "Uh-huh," she replied, continuing to focus on the barrel of the rifle. "And..." I fidgeted with my hands. Well, I was wondering if we could talk about everything." "I don't really know if there is much to talk about, Carl. Is there?" "I think there is." Maria raised her eyebrows, but didn't look up. "Well, by all means, I'd love to hear what you want to discuss." "I wanted to apologise. I was an absolute piece of shit to you." I began picking at the table where some of the laminate had chipped away. That is one way to describe it," Maria nodded. "I do care about you, Maria," I said. Why were my hands shaking? I could face down creatures, but couldn't have an uncomfortable conversation with someone. "It's just that I..." "Jesus, Carl," Maria cut in, finally looking at me. "Don't do this." "What?" "This," she motioned to me. "This whole situation. This conversation. I don't want to talk about it." "I already said my piece on it in Annie's study," she said. "After you told me very clearly that you didn't care." I looked down. I was ashamed of what I had said. Having it thrown back at me was horrible, but deserved. "Yeah, I wanted to tell you that it wasn't true." "Carl, please, I can't do this. I don't want to hear..." "Maria, just let me say what I have to say, then it can be done with, and we can get past this shit show of a situation," I blurted out in frustration, then added, "Please." Maria sighed. "Fine. This whole summer has been a clusterfuck, plain and simple. Worst I've ever experienced. If it wasn't for you, things would have been unmanageable. I trusted you more than anyone else, and you never let me down. You helped patch me up on several occasions, kept this place running when I couldn't." I looked at her. "You've been the closest friend I've had during my time here. It hurts to get close, then be forgotten." Maria met my eyes. "So why did you let me get close?" "I guess I needed it. I needed to have friends. I needed to have you and Marcus in all of this. Hell, even Coot, despite the fact he's a prick. I don't think I could have made it without all of you," I said with a sigh. "You all helped me realise I need to confront some things. I'm sorry for what I said, because I do care about you. I wish I didn't, because it's going to make everything so much worse when you leave. I'm sorry for what I said. I am really going to miss you." Maria nodded. "Well, I'm glad to have been able to help." She stood up and walked to the door. "I don't forgive you, but thanks for the apology." She left. I felt hollow. I got up and wandered out to the camp. The sky had begun to turn a deep maroon, which felt ominous. And while it was only 3 in the afternoon, I went to my cabin. I should have kept to my original plan of spending the rest of the day in existential dread of my impending death and ignoring everyone else. I kept to that plan the rest of the evening and saw no one else until the next morning. In the morning, those who were going to head out gathered together, 15 in total. The rest we left behind to take care of the kids. Not that it would matter if things didn't work out, but we were hopeful. We also didn't have enough weapons to go against all of this to arm everyone anyways. We emptied our armory of all the available weapons and anything else that might be of use to us. We didn't have much in the way of heavy hitters. There were a few that we had taken on our expedition, but we didn't know how well the others would do. We made sure to take everything that was silver, as that had proven effective enough. There was a pretty big stock of arrows that had silver tips to them. I don't know how Enola's tribe got so much silver, or how Coot got so many gifts from them, but I won't look that gift horse in the mouth. I wasn't ever great with a bow, and I wasn't terrible with it either, so I and most of the other counsellors grabbed those. We even managed to fashion an impromptu flamethrower using a weed sprayer that we filled with moonshine and stuck a butane torch on the end of it. It was clunky and didn't get much range, but any port in a storm. With our various weapons and implements ready, Annie cast a spell that made all of us invisible to everyone but each other. She told us it would last for only 40 minutes or so. With the summoning happening a couple of miles away, we needed to hurry. We separated into 3 different groups. Coots and Marcus were in one, Annie and Maria in another, then Jupiter and I in the last group. The other 9 counsellors were split up amongst the 3. We all began making our way at a jog, avoiding causing noise wherever possible, as it would still draw attention. We needed to get to the summoning without being noticed for this to work. Surprise was our only advantage. If we lost it, we would lose everything. The closer we got, the more monstrosities we came across, forcing us to travel slower or stop altogether and wait for them to pass. The forest had become corrupted here. The trees were twisted in unnatural ways or looked rubbery and limp. The colours were off too. The grass was brown and the trees had ranged from ashy grey to a mustard brown. The sky we saw through the trees turned a deeper maroon the further we went. Not long after, we edged close to the clearing. We all knew that the only chance we had was a mad charge towards whatever was summoning Melixodrak. As we looked into the clearing, there were so many strange things, colours that didn't make sense, or smells I couldn't define. Wind whipped at the dead and trodden grass within the clearing, but very little of it could be felt where we were. In the centre, we saw it, the portal. Light flashed and streaked through it, inverting and leaving after images both light and dark. In the centre of it all, I could see her, the self-titled Mother of Demons, who Annie had locked away onto her own plane because of how dangerous she and her children were. My best guess was Melixodrak was somewhere near about 30 feet tall, though it appeared that a third of her was still left on her side of the portal. She was perhaps half as wide. Her body looked slick and oily, veins and arteries could be seen near the surface, branching in fractal patterns across Melixodrak's stretched and bulging worm-like mass. She had no head, her mass having absorbed her neck and head long ago. Her face was distorted and twisted into something so grotesque it was painful to look at. She had 10 eyes, arranged in a circle all around a central toothy maw. There were 5 arms that were easily 20 feet long and spindly, spaced equidistant around her torso. On the ground were symbols which the flashing lights streaked from. Looking at them made my head hurt. There were 10 figures which appeared to be more emaciated and smaller versions of Melixodrak. Words rolled from them like a cacophony of screaming thunder. They undulated as the portal grew slowly to accommodate more of her. There was an overwhelming sense of fear mixed with acceptance, the feeling one gets when they know they are dying and there's nothing left to stop it. We all felt it. I could see it across everyone's faces. A simple acceptance of the fact that none of us would likely come back from this. The 3 of us in charge all made eye contact, then moved into the clearing, starting at a jog. The spell ended, causing us to appear some 100 yards from the summoning. An ear-rending sound pierced the rolling, screaming voices. Melixodrak turned to look in our direction. She regarded us as we view ants, nothing but an annoyance. Her gaze, however, caused most of us to stop cold. Then she saw Annie. Melixodrak convulsed with anger, her body turning from a mottled grey to a burnt orange. I could hear things coming our direction. The woods had erupted with violent sprinting. I saw a menagerie of horrors in the shadows, illuminated by the flashes. A deafening thum sounded to my left, and a searing light of violet light erupted from Annie towards Melixodrak, where it impacted with a violent explosion. The rest of us, taking this as good a cue as any, ran forward. Those of us with bows took shots at the creatures surrounding the portal, taking down the ones that were closest. Maria had gone down to one knee next to Annie, firing at the ones at the opposite side of the circle. The wind made it too difficult for us to fire our arrows with accuracy at a significant range. My group began sprinting clockwise towards the next summoner in an attempt to take it down as well. Coop was taking his group the opposite direction. The light suddenly dimmed from behind me, and the ground shook, causing me to stumble. I turned to look for the source and saw a couple of craters billowing smoke. Coop was sprawled out and struggling to get up. I saw a mangled corpse, one of the other counsellors, but I couldn't see the other two or Marcus. Maria had turned her focus behind her, towards the nearer tree line where she was firing at the creatures emerging from its depths. Annie was casting spell after spell. Flashes and blasts of different colours streaked at Melixodrak, who fired her own back. There were blood running down the side of Annie's face. She looked unsteady on her feet, but she continued to fight. I shouted at Tutor to keep the others moving. I took off at a dead sprint back towards the others. Further around the circle, as smoke cleared, I saw the kid with his homemade flamethrower ignite one of the summoning creatures. It lit easily and was almost immediately consumed by the flames. It made no sounds of pain and didn't cease its chanting until it had collapsed. I was hopeful we would be able to do this. We'd actually have a shot. As the flamethrower kid was celebrating, I saw something pounce on him from behind. The creature that attacked him had the same appearance as the bone-bladed beast Maria and I saw trying to get out of the door when we closed it. When all of this began, it quickly eviscerated him. I was too far away to hear the screams. I made it to Maria and Annie. The other three were firing arrow after arrow. They seemed to have had things as well in hand as could be expected. I saw that Coot was still struggling to get up. Where was Marcus? I ran to Coot, firing a silver-tipped arrow into a clambering mass of limbs and eyes that was making its way towards him. It shrieked and flailed wildly as the arrow struck one of its eyes. Coot was bleeding from the head as well, and his leg looked scorched. I saw the creature was still coming towards us. I raised my bow to fire again, but it whipped several of its arms at me, which stretched like elastic. Two of them grabbed my bow while the other struck me. The impact of the strike threw me backwards while it held firmly to my weapon, ripping it out of my hands. I landed on something hard and felt a crack and sharp pain in my ribs. I grabbed the object and found it was Coots' shotgun. The carvings and runes that ran up the shining silver barrel glowed faintly. With a gasp I got to my feet, my ribs protesting, and ran towards the thing about to kill Coot. It looked at me with a dozen eyes, and as it prepared to whip at me again with its arm, I raised the gun and fired. The runes flashed and the explosion that came out of the barrel flared blindingly white, like burning magnesium. The horror screamed in agony as the shot ripped through its soft flesh. It writhed violently, spurting black blood everywhere before falling into a twitching mass, then finally still. The rest of the creatures seemingly ignored us, running past us. They ran towards Annie and Maria. The spells had stopped flying, and I saw that Annie had put up a shield of some sort, a bubble. Two of the other counsellors were down. The creatures were ravenous, trying to break it, and I saw cracks forming. Melixodrak looked at the sight, and I was able to read her alien features. I knew it would show smug satisfaction at her victory. As I looked at her, feeling completely defeated, I saw movement near the portal. It was Marcus, limping weakly towards her massive form, completely disregarded by Melixodrak. He was holding the dagger. The ruby of it glowed dully. The smoke of the explosions must have obscured him from Melixodrak and myself. One of the horrors to our left noticed him, a thing with 3 legs, pupilless coffee-stained brown eyes and a jagged maw and 2 tongues. It galloped hungrily at Marcus. He didn't notice. I began running, calling to get his attention. He couldn't hear me over all the chaos. Even though the creature was short and its legs were thick and stubby, it moved with an unnerving grace. I didn't think I could get to him in time. My chest burned and screamed in protest of my laboured breathing against my cracked ribs. Unsure as to whether I was going to get close enough, I fired a round at the monstrosity, hoping to distract it. As my eyes burned from the blinding light, I saw it change course and charge at me. It screamed in rage at the source of the light. The little aberration was fast. I barely had time to chamber another round and take aim before it was on me. I fired, the blast erupting in a gout of white fire and metal. The shot did absolutely nothing to it. Shocked, I cocked the gun again, thinking I might have been too far away. I took aim to fire again, but was too slow. I felt its leathery, prehensile tongues grab my throat in a vice-like grip. It screeched as I tried to keep my balance and stop from falling in. In that split second, I saw its skin was hard and almost rocky in texture. This gun wasn't going to do anything to it, but it was all I had. In the last-ditch effort, I jammed the gun into its open mouth and fired. The boom was muffled by the creature's body, and it jerked violently from the point-blank blast, causing me to lose my balance and my grip on the gun. The tongues went limp, and I slumped awkwardly to the side. My face was covered in a nauseous substance, and I had to force down my desire to retch. But it didn't move. I pulled the gun out and cocked it again, looking around for Marcus. I saw him, a few yards away from Elixodrak. I could see another creature behind him, jerking and flailing as it turned grey and blown away by the wind. Fucking hell, we might just do this. If the dagger was as strong as Lederon claimed, we could just kill her. I felt a heavy presence and looked up to see Elixodrak looking at me. Then she noticed Marcus. She gave a heavy guttural scream as one of her arms shot towards Marcus. Praying to whatever might have been listening for this to work, I raised the shotgun at the arm and pulled the trigger. Click! No! No! Marcus raised the knife and was impaled by the dagger-like fingers of Elixodrak. His body barely moved as it passed through, as if he hadn't noticed it. Marcus's hand was still raised, but he now looked down at the alien limb that had pierced his abdomen as it lifted him up towards her face. I fell to my knees, hearing Maria's screams somehow piercing the deafening sounds in the clearing. I saw Tuita and 2 others fighting desperately. He was using his rifle as a club. That was it was over, and we had failed. I looked up, seeing Elixodrak study Marcus with one of her eyes that were the same size as his head. He was bleeding profusely, and I couldn't tell if he was alive or not. The knife was still in his limp hand. She studied him, speaking in a voice that I felt in my chest. As she spoke, Marcus gripped the dagger and drove it into her eye. It burst with yellow fluid and she screamed. The ruby on the hill burst alight, blindingly bright. He stabbed her again before she could whip him away, sending him careering like a limp doll to the ground dozens of yards away. Marcus flipped and rolled violently and he crumpled into a heap. Elixodrak screeched again, clawing at her eye as the flesh turned grey. It cracked and began to turn into dust, spreading its ragged fractals across and through her body. She writhed and shook. The forest around us erupted with inhuman screams of horror. All of the creatures I could see were running away, trying to flee. The portal began to falter. The creature performing the ritual were clawing at their own flesh. As Elixodrak's form disintegrated, it flowed into the rift first as a stream, then a river. I could see creatures begin crashing through the trees and careering towards the failing opening. I dropped to the ground, hoping to avoid being knocked into the portal by a flying demon body. The rushing of wind and screams were overwhelming. It felt like it dragged on for hours, being stuck by flailing limbs and bodies. Without warning, there was a boom which blew me across the open field, causing me to ragdoll across the grass. All was silent. When nothing else happened, I lifted my head to look at my surroundings. The sky was now a strange swirl of maroon, purple and blue as the sky above began to come through. The rest of the surroundings still looked bleak, an alien wasteland, pockmarked by craters and smouldering areas of grass. Maria and Annie looked to have survived. The shield that Annie had put up protected them from the onslaught of creatures. Coot was sitting up, looking confused and dazed, and I saw Tutor and one of the two counsellors that had stuck with him coming our way as well. Finally, I looked over to where Marcus lay crumpled and unmoving. With effort, I stood up and began walking over to him. I knelt by him, unsure of what to do. He wasn't breathing, and his wound was no longer hemorrhaging blood. There was no way around the fact that he was dead. I didn't know Marcus as well as I wish I had at that moment. He was a good man who'd suffered a lot because of this place. He'd been helpful. He went out of his way to help Maria and I when he didn't need to. And this is what he got for defeating a world of ending evil. A hole through his abdomen and his body shattered and broken on a field in the middle of nowhere. I heard footsteps approach, quiet, reverent. I turned to Annie as she walked up, Maria supporting her on her unsure legs. "Is there anything you can do?" I asked quietly. Annie shook her head. "Once life has been extinguished, it is gone. I have no way of bringing him back. I'm sorry." I felt a sickening numbness at all of this. Maria was crying. Coot had limped over, and once he saw Marcus, he cursed under his breath. The others said nothing. Time dragged on for quite some time until Coot finally spoke up. "Did anyone else make it? I only remember that blast that knocked me out." "No," I said flatly, "just us." I looked at everyone, seeing that haunted look in their eyes. Marcus managed to remain the most intact, however. The others will take a little bit of time to collect. We can bring him with us and come back for the rest. Everyone else agreed, silently. I met Maria's eyes, and she nodded to me. I took the knife out of his hand, which he had managed to keep a hold of, handing it to Coot. The gem no longer glowed, and it looked to have shattered. We gripped his limbs. She took his legs and I took his arms. Annie offered to levitate him, but we both declined. We had been his friends and we felt it was right to do this, even if we had only known him for a short time. The journey to the camp was quiet. I kept looking straight ahead, knowing that I couldn't look at Marcus's broken body, and kept going. I kept my mind focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Upon reaching the camp, we took Marcus to one of the empty cabins and placed a sheet over him. We sent the other counsellors to go retrieve the remains of the others. I went to my cabin. I ignored when people knocked on the door. I just wanted to be left alone. I wanted to go to sleep and not acknowledge reality for as long as possible. I did drift off at some point and was jolted awake when I heard the cabin door open violently. I saw Maria in the door and her eyes looked red from crying. She spoke before I asked what she wanted. I can't be alone right now," Maria said, her voice cracking despite obvious effort to keep it level. "But I can't be around the others. Coot has drunk himself into oblivion. Annie took off for her home, and Tutor has gone to check the ranger station. The other counsellors are all happy. I want to know what happened. They keep trying to talk to me. You're the only one I can possibly stand to be with right now." "Sure, come in." I sat up and moved over for her to join me on the bed. She sat down and pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do I do what?" "Remain so detached," Maria said. "I don't have the luxury to do otherwise. There is so much going on here that I can't afford to feel much, at least until the summer is over. I just have to put it off until everyone is gone. Then I have around 9 months to fall apart and put myself back together." "That sounds miserable," Maria said. "It is, Most years aren't like this. Most years are just strange, not nearly so dangerous. Still, Marcus wasn't the first one I've seen die. I know. I figured with you being here and all, you've probably seen things I never wanted to. She leaned her head against my shoulder. You shouldn't have to be alone. I don't want to be, I agreed. I can stay. No, you can't. I know, Maria whispered. I leaned my head against hers. Her hair smelled fruity, mixed with oil from her skin and stale sweat. I wish you could. I would rather you would, but you can't. Maria nodded. I'm sorry about how I acted earlier. You don't need to apologise. I understand why you did what you did. I put my arm around her shoulders in reassurance. I forgive you. I forgive you too, she said. I wanted to stay mad at you. It would make leaving easier, but... She trailed off. I felt a weight lift off of me. Thank you, I whispered. Maria nodded. That's where the conversation died. We fell asleep together. There was some deep part of us that needed that physical human connection. The need to know you aren't alone and there is someone else who might understand your situation. It was the best night's sleep I'd had in ages. The next day we had a funeral for all of those that had died fighting. Marcus had been wrapped up in a shroud, deep emerald in colour with gold threading that wove an elaborate pattern of shapes and symbols. We did the best we could with the others. Some of them had only been eviscerated, others we found only pieces of. Those we could we wrapped in shrouds as richly coloured and intricately decorated as Marcus's. The bright colours felt almost inappropriate when it came to the situation. Being at Wanahee, however, it seemed to fit perfectly, bright and rich colours at a funeral. Everyone participated in some way. The kids sang a terrible version of Amazing Grace. Since they only had an afternoon to practice, it can be forgiven. Everyone else helped with digging or placing the remains in their respective resting places. Maria gave the eulogy. Everyone else added in things they remembered about the dead. When there was a pause from people saying their piece, I stood up and walked to where Marcus lay. I had been thinking about what I would say, and as I stood there, none of it seemed to fit, so I decided to just wing it. The night before we went out, Marcus came and found me in my cabin. I wanted to be alone, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to convince him to leave me alone. We talked, and he told me something profound that I've continued to think about. He told me to always try to correct my mistakes and to be kind, even if no one would remember it. Marcus was like that. He was kind, even if others weren't kind to him. That's who he was. I looked at everyone gathered around. I know most of you won't remember your time here. You won't remember what happened. You won't remember each other. You won't remember me. And you won't remember who this funeral is for. You won't remember Marcus. That's okay. I'll remember all of this for you and for them. But I want you to remember what Marcus said. I want you to be kind, and I want you to try to be better. Fix your mistakes when you get home. I hope that you will at least remember that. I would never want to forget that, even if I could. I sat down next to Maria, who put a hand on my back. I wiped away the tears. The kids all took turns putting handfuls of dirt on the graves, marring the bright colours with dark earth. As they all walked away, most of the counsellors went with them. The rest of us finished burying our departed friends and co-workers. When we were finished, we all stood before all of the graves. Each was marked with a simple cross. Not due to any religious affiliation, but because it's an obvious grave marker when all you have are 2x4s. The kids painted each to match the shrouds, then painted the names and decorated them. It was sweet, if a bit sloppy looking. I think they all would have appreciated it in some way. The rest of the day was a blur. It was the end of the summer. We cut it early given the whole demon invasion, and everyone was packing. By mid-afternoon, the bus was brought back to life, and tutors started shuttling campers and counsellors down into town, where they would have different travel arrangements to get them home. The final bus was being loaded up as the sky began to turn orange. I was helping load up the various duffel bags with Maria. It was going to be a sombre end to a melancholy day. "Is that everything?" I asked, straightening up and stretching my back. The kids all sat on the bus and were chatting excitedly. "Well, there's one last thing." Maria handed me a piece of folded up paper. I took it. "What's this?" "In case you get lonely," she said. I opened it and found a phone number. "You want me to call you?" "Yeah," she smiled. "It's going to be lonely, I'm sure. And it would be very nice to hear your voice, even if I don't remember who it is. Who knows, maybe I will remember you if you call me." I couldn't help but smile at that, at how optimistic she was being, even now. "I hope you do, but I won't hold it against you if you don't." Maria came forward and wrapped her arms around me. I couldn't remember the last time a friend had hugged me. It had been years, since before first coming to Wanahee. I felt a familiar warmth within myself as I put my arms around her. I didn't know when I would have a chance like this again, so I clung to it, like a life preserver in the middle of an ocean. Things that would be alright eventually if I just held on to this and to the memory it would create. We started to pull away and she kissed me, a simple, sweet and innocent kiss. Maria's lips were warm and soft, and the love I felt from them was pure and genuine. There was no hint of lust and there was no infatuation, simple affection and love. "I hope you find Ruby, Carl West. I hope you allow yourself to remember her, and I hope you can resolve what happened so you can leave one day." Maria smiled at me. "And when you do, come find me so we can be friends again. Promise me you'll do that." "I promise I will, and I'll even try calling from time to time," I said, returning her smile. "Good." Maria wrapped me in another quick hug. "I'll miss you." "No you won't," I said. She pulled back and winked. "I will see you again, Carl West." "I hope so. Goodbye, Maria." Maria got on the bus and waved from the window. I waved back and watched the bus drive down the road, eventually disappearing around a bend. All in all, that could have been a much better depressing goodbye. I sighed and walked back to my cabin, where I began writing all of this down. The phone started to ring. I didn't know who would be calling, but decided to answer anyways. "Carl," the owner said. "How are things at my favourite little getaway?" "Oh hey, I didn't expect you," I said, sitting up more. All things considered, we've been better. Had to bury a lot of people, stop the demon invasion that threatened to take over the world, and I'm likely to die alone." "Carl, I don't know when to take you seriously. Demons? What a crazy imagination you have," he laughed in a noticeably fake manner. "You were the one who told me Melixodrak was a demon god from some other plane of existence. We had a whole conversation about it," I insisted. "I think you need to lay off Coots' stash, Carl. I think it's starting to have some adverse effects on you. Hold on a second." He began talking to someone else in a different language. Sounded like Russian. "Carl, the reason I'm calling is because we're going to be doing things a little differently at the camp this year." My stomach dropped at those words. "Different? How?" "Well, due to certain unforeseen and unfortunate circumstances surrounding the camp," he said carefully, "of which you are not completely not to blame for, the camp didn't turn much of a profit." "Are you firing me?" I asked. "What? No," the owner said. "No, not at all, Carl. We're extending our operation into the fall." I could hear yelling in that foreign language in the background. He said something back to them in the same tongue. They sounded angry. "What do you mean, you're extending the operation into the fall?" I didn't like the sound of this at all. "A couple of different parties have approached me about using the camp during the off-season for various purposes. They also offered to pay much more than our regular asking prices, so of course I agreed." Oh no. I felt my heart racing. This couldn't be happening. "Yeah, So starting in a few weeks, our first groups will be in. They're ghost hunters or paranormal investigators. They'd heard rumours about this place that were spread somehow. He coughed. They will be doing mostly their own thing, and they will only be needing your help occasionally. Don't know how well the camera equipment will work, but it might be interesting. They're going to have cameras? I asked incredulously. That sounds like a bad idea, sir. Nah, it should be fine, the owner said dismissively. After they leave, there will be a bunch of people from a tech company that are looking to do a nature retreat. Why? I asked, my head on the desk. Supposedly it's for team building. I don't know, there's a lot of new age hippie shit that people are doing now in business. No, that's not what I meant, I said. I meant, why are we doing this? I told you, Carl, the owner said, taking the tone of a parent explaining everything to their kid. We need to do more to make ends meet. There was more yelling, bordering on screaming, in the background. I heard him curse under his breath. Look, I gotta get going, Carl. Keep an eye out for the paranormal team within the next few weeks. Make sure to give them a warm Camp Wanahee welcome. No, don't hang up. He began screaming in an unknown language with the others. The line went dead, and I sat there listening to the dial tone, having a hard time believing what I'd heard. There was going to be more people here. I hung up the phone. The good feelings I had were gone, replaced with a similar foreboding feeling that I had before summer started. I let out a string of explanatives. So this is where I leave it for now. I'll see you all in the fall. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they really would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. And don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. And if you'd like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase and I'll feature it in one of the videos. Have you written a creepypasta story you would like me to narrate? Have you had any cryptid sightings, paranormal or supernatural encounters, or even had a creepy or terrifying situation you would like to share? Well, I now have my very own subreddit community where you can submit your stories. The link for that is also in the thumbnail as well as below in the description. You can submit your stories there, or you can send them to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. Now I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit and Discord. And if you'd like to support the channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit and Discord. And if you would like to support the channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. And any and all donations would be gratefully received. Again, that will also be below. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.